So I will start off the panel. I am Melinda Roberts. I'm the chair of the Pre-Law Advisory Committee, which consists of 9 people on campus, most of whom are actually lawyers. If they're not lawyers, they are very passionate about helping our students get into the law schools of their choice. And I also coordinate the pre-law program at the college. And I'm so glad to see the panelists. And I know that in this format, we can't see the students who are online with us. I don't have access to even a list of the students, but I'm thrilled that many students have been able to make time today for this luncheon panel that we're going to be doing. Lisa Dombeck, Brian Daly, Ethan Kish, William Opal, Christina Santon. It's just really terrific of the 5 of you to be here today. We really appreciate it. And it is, of course, the Office of Development and Alumni Engagement with Laura Smith and the Pre-Law Society with Dylan Chittick, who has put this together. And so we are extremely grateful to them as well. So Dylan, I'll turn it over to you. I will say, let me just quickly say, Dylan is, let me introduce him. He has been the really dynamic vice president of the exec board of the Pre-Law Society this entire year. He's been great to work with, amazing to work with. And he's also a political science major on his way to law school in due course.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Roberts. Hi, everyone. My name is Dylan, junior poli-sci major at the college, and I'm so excited you all came to this panel. The Pre-Law Society really worked hard to help make this come true and happen for you all. So after I give my introduction, I'm going to pass it off to the first speaker. To everyone to introduce themselves. First will be Lisa, Brian, Ethan, Phil, and Christina. Can you just give us a little bit about your background and where you are now in your career with law?
Hi, I'm Lisa Dornbach Flanagan. I am from the class of 2000. I was a biology and philosophy major. I had no idea whatsoever that I was going to go to law school when I was at TCNGA, but I was a biologist, and I went to grad school for biology and realized I didn't want to do that forever. So I was trying to figure out what I would do with that background and degree instead, and went to an alternative career panel in the sciences, and I heard about people who were going into patent law. So I was like, oh, that sounds interesting and better suited to my skills. So I went to law school. Since 2009, I've been a patent attorney. I was at a law firm for about 9 years, and now I'm in a biopharmaceutical company. And so I deal with anything having to do with patent protection for biotech.
Afternoon, everyone. Brian Daly. I graduated TCNJ from the business school in 2010. I went straight through to law school. So I've been practicing since 2013. Started my career at a law firm in Philadelphia, but for the past 8 years, I've been at a mid-sized firm in Richmond, Virginia. So thanks for having me today.
I'm Ethan. It's nice to see you all. I graduated from TCNJ in 2014 as a poli-sci major and philosophy minor. The minor was mostly wonderful classes with Dr. Roberts. And then I went straight through to law school. And then since graduating in 2017, I've clerked for 2 judges, worked at a law firm for 2 years in New York City, and now I'm doing a 2-year civil rights fellowship.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Opal, in class of 2007. I was an English major when I was at TCNJ. After graduating, I took a year off and taught, and then went through to law school and graduated in 2011. I've been practicing since that time, initially in-house with a local government, and for the past 5 years with a firm in northern New Jersey. This is the second time I'm participating in one of these panels. I believe I participated 2 years ago, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Santon. I graduated with the class of 2021, so I just graduated in May. I'm a 1L at New York Law School. I have a degree in criminology with a concentration in politics, law, and society. And this summer, I'm going to be working at the Department of Investigation in New York with a concentration in Squad 1, which talks about the Prison Rape Elimination Act and making sure that correctional officers abide by the rules of that.
So thank you all for introducing yourselves. And the way I thought this panel could go will kind of follow a timeline. So starting with TCNJ, then applying to law school, and being in law school, and then ultimately looking at finding jobs and internships throughout and after. So let's start first with being at TCNJ and taking classes. What classes did you think helped prepare you for your career in law or your career after graduating TCNJ?
So I'm going to skip this one because I had no idea in TCNJ that I was going to end up in law school.
That's a great question. So I sort of knew I wanted to go to law school probably by sophomore year. At the business school, at least back then, you had to take Business 200, which was like business and law, and that was with Professor Michaels. And I just really enjoyed that course. And I thought, I like my business major, but being a lawyer and kind of learning that sort of trade and being able to advise businesses on their sort of legal rights and negotiate contracts was interesting to me. So that course was really helpful. With what I do now, I specialize in investment management and securities law. So I feel like I wish I would have paid more attention in my finance classes because I end up dealing with numbers a lot more than I anticipated. So that's probably, at least for me, what I would have done more of. And then aside from that, again, being a business major, we didn't necessarily do as much intensive writing as a lot of other majors. And that's a huge part of being a lawyer, even a business lawyer. So anytime there are really, intense writing courses where you really have to focus on your craft, those would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I came to TCNJ thinking I'd be a high school history teacher, like my parents. And so I started taking a bunch of different classes in political science and history. And then I got an internship at the state legislature. And I spent almost 2 years interning with a state assemblyman. And it was during the marriage equality debate in New Jersey. And during that time, I was constantly interacting with lawyers, whether they were policymakers or legislators or people actually drafting the bills. And so for me, I started thinking, oh, maybe law school is something I should think more about. And then I started taking classes like moot court. I'm not sure if at the time I was there, the poli-sci department had a moot court team. So I did that. And then Dr. Roberts's law philosophy classes were really helpful too, to think about sort of the background behind all of the laws. So that was sort of my route to law school.
I had a similar experience at TCNJ. I was unsure if I wanted to be a high school English teacher or a lawyer. So I majored in English. I took a few political science courses that were helpful. I thought about minoring in political science, but ultimately didn't. But just throughout my time at TCNJ, even as an English major, reading, writing, and being able to write well, and more importantly, are skills that really helped both in law school and in my practice now. So, I gave teaching a shot for a little bit, but ultimately decided that law was the path I wanted to go to. So, ultimately I went to law school and went forward that way.
When I was in TCNJ, I took a lot of criminology classes as well as philosophy and political science classes. One of my favorite classes was with Dr. Roberts, and it actually helped me on the LSAT, Intro to Logic. I recommend everyone take it. It was the best class to take for the LSAT. I also recommend taking a constitutional law class if that fits anywhere in your schedule. It's extremely important, and you get in law school, you take it for an entire year. So that's just how important it is. And definitely, I specifically wanted to do criminal law. That's what I plan to do when I graduate. So I took a lot of criminal law, law and procedure classes, which definitely have helped me in criminal law 100 in law school now.
Thank you so much. And also thank you for Christina for that perfect segue into the next topic, the LSAT. This test is, the test that we take to get into law school and can have a lot of fear behind it. So some of my questions are, one, how did you prepare for the LSAT? Did you do a course? Did you not do a course? And also, how many times did you take it? Did you take it more than once? Some people say it's good to take it more than once. It's not good to take it more than once. So what are your thoughts and opinions on that?
I only took it once, but I prepared for it by taking practice tests quite a bit. Just kind of the more you could do it under as closely timed, like real life conditions as possible, I think is helpful to kind of just get yourself mentally prepared for how much time you have or don't have to answer all those questions.
Yeah, I agree. Practice tests were great. I also took a prep course. I think it was through the Princeton Review, but it was in Princeton. That was super helpful just to kind of give you a structure for how you go through and do your preparation. But yeah, definitely practice tests were big. And I also only took the LSAT once.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Lisa and Brian just said. Especially I took an entire summer where I was just working a part-time job. I think it was junior year summer, and just went to my hometown library and took practice tests when I wasn't working. And it was really that drilling of practice tests that you see your score kind of like gradually go up. So yeah, and I would also encourage, I think nowadays, I mean, people that maybe Christina would know better, but I think you can also maybe take the GRE to apply to law schools, some law schools. So it might be worth thinking about whether, a GRE, you're more suited to the GRE or the LSAT, maybe take a practice of both. Just something to think about.
Yeah, similar experience. I took a course. I think it was helpful to be around other people who were going through similar experiences. I worked, so I took a course at night, and it was just people who were either seniors in college or a year or so out, like myself, and just understanding that and being able to take the time to practice was you'll see as you get through it, as you start preparing, the importance of balancing the time and understanding the time you have to take the test, and the practice tests are obviously the best way to, in my opinion, to prepare for that process.
I also took a course, but definitely practice tests are the best way to see your score improve. I took it twice, not because I needed to. However, when I was taking it, it was completely virtual, so you had to take it at home. And the first time I took it, my computer crashed, and so I had to take it again. It wasn't a big deal, but definitely I think the virtual version is a lot, not harder, but it's just a lot more stressful because you are at home and you don't know the things that could happen while you are at home. So I wish I would have taken it in person, but besides that, I know you can take the GRE now. That's just new, depending on the law school you go to. Some of them do take the GRE, but definitely practice and dedicate yourself to it.
Thank you so much.
Also, sorry, Dylan, just to jump in, I just want to say, because we didn't really talk about it, I would encourage people to take it twice if you don't like your first score too. I knew a heck of a lot of friends in law school that took the LSAT 2-3 times. So don't be discouraged if the first one doesn't go as well as you'd hoped.
That is great advice, knowing that it's not really one and done. You have so many opportunities to do it and make sure that you have the best score possible because you want to put your best score possible in the application. And now, speaking of applications, personal statement. How did you do yours? How did you write yours? What were some things you spoke about? And lastly, how do you make sure that you get your reasoning for why you want to become a lawyer and go to law school or be in the field of law across when writing your personal statement?
For me, my personal statement tried to reflect that I was coming from a non-traditional path. That I mean, I certainly was not the only person with a science background who was ending up in law school, but you know, like trying to explain, I was in undergrad, then I was in graduate school, now I'm applying to go to more school. So like, why am I doing this? Trying to, you know, explain, you know, why I pivoted and saw that the law, patent law was, you know, what I would be good at. And so I tried to really capture that in my personal statement, and just make it clear that like I was also applying to very particular schools because of their programs in patent law and like proximity to you know, pharmaceuticals, and like I knew that was where my best training ground was going to be. So I tried to focus on that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't recall exactly what I talked about in my personal statement, but I would echo what Lisa said in terms of focusing just on why you want to go to law school. It's not to say you have to know exactly what you want to do, but to say, here's my thinking and here's who I am. And so I think that's what they're looking for, rather than they don't want you to just write what you think they want to hear. They actually want to hear about you and your perspective. So.
Yeah, I echo all of that. And I'd also say, you know, I think, Lisa, your case is kind of a particular one where you had a really good idea of what you wanted to do after law school. I certainly didn't have a specific idea, and I think that's okay. I don't think law schools are expecting you to say, you know, I want to be a, you know, a management side employment lawyer, or I want to be a transactional lawyer in the specific space. I think it's okay to not exactly have an idea of what specifically you want to do, but I think it's a good idea to sort of get all your experiences together in a cohesive narrative to explain why you think law school is the next, you know, step for you. And I would also encourage you to get a lot of eyes on it, send it to a lot of people, you know, friends, professors, you know, because sometimes different perspectives can make you think of it in a different way.
Yeah, my mother was a paralegal for a small 2-lawyer firm, and but apart from that, I didn't really have too much exposure to the law prior to going to law school. I didn't know many lawyers, many people who were lawyers, apart from those two gentlemen. But you know, what they did in there, they had a part of their practice was criminal defense, and one of them did some public defender work, and I found that to be very interesting when I was applying, and you know, their commitment to what they were doing was an important part of my statement. And I thought that, you know, that was potentially a path that I wanted to choose. So when I wrote my statement, I just, you know, seeing their commitment to justice in their practice was something that I focused on, and something that, you know, I thought was important to, you know, to set forth in my personal statement to show why I wanted to go to law school. So it should be something that's personal to you, definitely. But, you know, draw on whatever experience you have, whether you know no lawyers or you know many, you know, whatever is driving you to go to law school is certainly what I would focus on.
Yeah, going off of just all of that, my personal statement, I wrote about advocating for individuals who don't have a voice, and I kind of honed in on women and people of color. I grew up in a Hispanic background. No one went to law school. No one went to college in my family. So I really spoke upon that, and kind of paving the way to the rest of my family and the rest of my community, to show them that they have the ability to do whatever they want, no matter what their background is. That's what I talked about in mine. I also wrote a diversity statement. I know a lot of law schools, you can write a diversity statement to kind of talk about specifics that weren't talked about in your personal statement. If that applies to you, I definitely recommend you do that. Law schools love to learn about you as a person and what drives you. And that's what makes you different from everybody else applying.
Thank you so much. Leading on to the next question that we have is about choosing your law school. So after you do your personal statement, after you apply, you may have options in front of you. So how do you choose which school is the best for you in terms of going through the law school and also after it? Because for college, we all choose it based on our interests. Some schools may have specializations. I know, Christina, you said you went to do criminal law, and now you're working in NYU with bikers. So did you go to a school based on a specialization, or did you choose one just randomly?
So I specifically, so what I would recommend is like to look beyond the rankings, and there's like obviously like certain schools that have a phenomenal reputation nationwide, but then there's going to be a lot of schools that are better known in a particular either a geographic region or better known for a particular type of law. So for me, it was like I knew I wanted to be in California. And I knew I was going into patent law. And so looking in the places where that was going to be my best training ground. So I was looking at schools in San Francisco and in San Diego and applying to those, knowing that they had good patent law programs and proximity to the clients that I would want to work for. And that was really like, I knew I wanted to practice there, and I knew there were going to be a lot of people who were alumni of those schools. They would like know better than if I was, going to a school 1,000 miles away where people in California didn't really know that name of that school. Like by being in the area and choosing a school, that many people in the area were familiar with, I think that's really helpful if it's not necessarily a school that has high name recognition.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an important factor that maybe sometimes gets overlooked is geography is important, sort of regardless of kind of the ranking of the school. And that's just logical because like Lisa said, you're going to have more alumni in the area. There's going to be a little bit more name recognition. For me, it was probably the more important factors at the time were, it was a combination of cost and ranking. So, because TCNJ fortunately was a public school, it was relatively affordable, and that was, good for me. And I really needed the same thing for law school. So, I was able to find a school that, had a good ranking from my perspective, but also was more affordable than a lot of other places. So it was really a combination of those things for me. But I agree. I think geography is an important consideration as well.
Yeah, I would echo that too. I think it was cost considerations, geography, and another thing that I wasn't really sure exactly what route I wanted to go to. So I ended up going to like a larger law school that had a bunch of different clinical programs that I could try different things out during law school and take a bunch of different classes. And I think that was pretty helpful for me to be able to try a bunch of different things. I'd also encourage people that if you get waitlisted at a school to don't get discouraged, because I ended up, I was going to go to one school and then I got waitlisted at another, and then I stayed on the wait list all summer, and then I got off like first or second week of August. And so, keep your options open until the end. So.
Yeah, and I think my concern is mostly geographical. My wife or my then fiance, but now wife, was in veterinary school at the University of Pennsylvania. My grades were not good enough to go to that law school, but I found one relatively close by where we would be in close proximity. I mean, it wasn't the best ranked law school that I was accepted to, but at the same time, kind of balancing what was important in my life and kind of the path that I was looking at for law. Those were my considerations, and that's why I chose to go where it went.
I think everyone said everything accurate that you should definitely consider. When I picked my law school, I knew I wanted to stay in the tri-state area. I looked at programs that my law school offered. I knew I wanted to do criminal law and family law, and my law school was ranked highly for both of them. And then lastly, the cost. I live at home to save on that cost, but I definitely looked at the scholarships and who was going to give me the most money and who was going to give me the most connections possible. And that's ultimately how I picked mine.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Then moving on to being in law school. When you have that transition from undergrad where you become accustomed to certain things, whether it's dealing with certain professors at TCNJ, we are a mid-sized school, so similar, like you would have the same professor twice, so you can build that relationship. How did you find that transition into law school where it's a whole new community, finding your footing, joining clubs? How was the transition into law school for you?
I think my experience is a little different than maybe some people. I think my experience is probably different if you're coming straight out of undergrad. So I had already, I was like 29 when I started law school, and I was kind of approaching it like a job, basically. Like I kind of had, like I'm here to learn, to study during the day. My fiance was home, and I wasn't like living on campus, and so I was kind of compartmentalizing those things, which is, I think, good from a studying and getting my stuff done perspective, but it was not good from a networking and really getting to know my classmates perspective, which is like another just thing that I didn't appreciate at the time. That these are people, the connections that you're going to make from activities, being in class together, or writing journals together, whatever it is. You're going to meet up with them in the future. You're not even going to realize it. But so I kind of neglected that aspect, but I think, like, in terms of, it's a lot of work. I think it's like a different level of work than undergrad. Just like the intensity of it, and how like everything is riding basically sometimes on like one exam, or just like a couple of assignments that you handed in. So I treated it with that intensity, but yeah, don't neglect the interpersonal relationships in there.
Yeah, I agree. And it was a big transition for me because it was the first time I ever lived outside of New Jersey. So just like that aspect alone was a big change for me. But I think I went straight through undergrad to law school, and I sort of wish I had treated it more like a job because of the intensity of the work, and you really have to step it up and be on your game from day one. You can't really sort of wait and cram for the test at the end of the semester. So I think just being ready to take the work seriously, and again, sort of treat it a little bit more like a job. You're still in school, and there's still all that, social stuff. You get to enjoy a lot of sort of camaraderie with your fellow students, but to kind of treat it a little bit more like, a job. This is my profession. I think is a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to piggyback off that, I think I was one of the only straight through K to JD students in my section of law school. And so most of my friends had just come from, 2 or 3 years in the private sector or government. And so they treated it like a job. And so I sort of opened my eyes the first couple of weeks and thought, oh, I guess I should be doing that too. And so I think that was really helpful in the beginning. I will say that the cadence of law school was very, very different than undergrad, in the sense that, week to week, you're basically doing your reading assignments, going to class, going to lecture, taking notes, reviewing your notes, then doing it over again, basically until the exam, which is very different than the classes I took in TCNJ, where it was, maybe bi-weekly papers, or, at least a couple papers per term. So that was a big adjustment. And then the last thing I would just say, I know a number of law schools now, they have sort of pre-1L introduction to law school sort of class that you can maybe, I don't know if you can Zoom it over the summer or how it works. I wish I would have had that. So if your school has that, I think that would be really something to take advantage of.
And although I was just coming off of 1 year of work, that was the kind of my mantra going into law school, that I was going to treat it as a job. So if I had, 1 or 2 lectures before 1 o'clock, I would go to those. I'd spend the time after that, either reviewing or preparing for the afternoon lectures. And then, I'd stay at the library until 5 or 6 at night. Just so I had a structured kind of 9 or 10 to 5 schedule every day, and getting in that rhythm really helped me adjust. I hadn't been in school for a year, which doesn't sound like a long time, but it was, the first few weeks a little bit of a challenge to get back into being in school, taking notes. So definitely structure is important. And, whether you approach it like a job or you just approach it as, finding, a way to structure your entire day. off of what you're doing, I think winds up being helpful when it's time to prepare. Because someone mentioned that, you don't have a number of chances to, do well on this test or do well on this paper, and then maybe it'll all shake out in the end. You need to have your notes down. You need to understand what you do every week, so that when it comes time at the end for the final exam, you're prepared and you're ready to do well on that.
Yeah. Going off what Ethan said, my school, law school, actually had a summer program. I did not do the summer program, but I definitely recommend it. But 2 weeks prior to the beginning of classes, we did a 2-week orientation period where we had some of our 1L professors come in and start teaching us a little bit here and there of what we are to expect. And if your law school does do that, I highly recommend it. It gets you into the structure, you get to meet your professors, and they really listen to what they tell you, because all professors are very specific as to what they want and what they look for at the end of the day. And if you can catch that at the beginning rather than the end, it can definitely benefit you. My 1L semester, I did not treat it like a job. I went to classes and I came home. This year specifically, I did. I'll get up, I'll be at school by 8 o'clock and I'll leave school at 6. It gives me that structure. I go to my classes. I'm able to have all the time in the library I want after my classes or before my classes to do my work. So then when I do come home, I can, if I want to go to the gym or if I want to cook, I have that time, because it's so important to have your mental health be healthy and to have time for everybody else in your life, because while you are going to law school, life is still happening around you. And life doesn't stop for you because you're in law school. I hate to say it, but it doesn't. And you want to be there for those moments as well.
Thank you. Now, we just have a couple more questions about your law school journey and about your process. But the next question is, when you're in law school, you have the great opportunity to do internships, clerking, jobs while in law school. So would you be able to explain what were some type of jobs you did while being in law school, and also explain what it means to be a clerk or clerk for a judge?
So, so sometimes you can be either like working at a law firm or working for a judge like during the semester. You can do it during the summer. And so for me, I had been an extern for a judge in the Federal District, Northern District of California, one semester of my 3L year. It was just a totally different experience than anything else that I had in law school, and I didn't really have any desire to go into litigation, but just to kind of see the courtroom and kind of experience that part of the law world was interesting to me. It was something that was a departure from what I was learning in class. It's something I knew wasn't going to be doing forever. But if you are interested in litigation, right, like having and I think other people can speak to this, like clerking for different judges is really important. In some cases, they are kind of like feeder judges to particular other jobs or other kinds of internships. So they're very useful. I also was working as a law clerk while I was in law school. So I was working for the firm that I was going to end up at full time, but it was still students. So I'm being supervised. But that was a really good way to get hands-on training, because in law school, you're kind of learning how to think like a lawyer, but you're not really learning a lot of the practical skills that you need day by day. Like that stuff that comes in time on the job. So the nuts and bolts of how to write a patent application and things like that, I was learning at the job that I was going to be at. And so I clerked part-time, and it was a good way to also, earn some money to start paying off for law school.
So I did not work during the semesters, although my 3L year, I participated in one of my law school's clinics, which was a really, really good experience. Just kind of the practical experience of having clients and having to maintain a file and kind of, be practical with the things you're doing. in the summers, both of my summers in law school, I worked for big law firms, one in New Jersey and another in Philadelphia. And so I kind of knew that's where I wanted to at least start my career. So that was really, really good experience because that's, always worked at law firms. But I did not, clerk for a judge, either during law school or after. So I can't really opine on that at all.
Yeah, and I often get confused in the way like all these words are used, clerk and extern and intern, and like the way I would focus on and the way I thought about it was getting different types of experiences, no matter what the title is, in different areas or different, whether it's a private law firm, government, public sector, judge, and trying to figure out your path and see where you want to go. I did a law clerk, a clerkship with 2 judges after I graduated. So they were 1-year jobs, like full-time jobs. And, I could talk about that more when we get to like career time, but I would encourage people that are interested in litigating. I think that's like a really great opportunity. And if you don't want to do a full year after you graduate, you can always intern for a judge during a summer or do an externship during a semester.
After my second year, I interned with a local government entity in New Jersey. It was one of the few opportunities that I had, and I enjoyed it very much. It was mostly transactional work, and that kind of, gave me an idea of for the first time, and the end of my second year in law school of kind of what I wanted to do. And I was able to, in my third year, do an externship at the county counsel's office to further that. And I wound up in the final semester of my third year, taking land use courses and government contracts courses that, were able to finally get me on the path to where I wound up. I also, that was more on the transactional side. I also, in my, my last semester of law school, took a trial advocacy program just so I was able to see the transactional side and the litigation side. And I found both to be very helpful. And to this day, like I practice incorporates elements of both. So, it was able to provide me a pretty good foundation as I went on with my career.
I can't talk too much on internships now in law school. Outside, in my undergrad, I did do internships with TCNJ. I worked for Mercer County Prosecutor's Office, which was a great experience. I also worked for the state police in the Operations and Intelligence Unit, doing COVID relief work, which was really awesome. And then right before I went to law school, I worked in a private law office that did criminal prosecution and civil matters. So I highly recommend, if you have any chance to kind of just wet your feet a little bit in the legal field to kind of feel it out and see what you want to do, I would recommend that. This summer, like I said, I'm going to be working with the Department of Investigation, who is one of the oldest law enforcement agencies in the country, and they do investigate corruption and fraud within city agencies. So I'll be working specifically with the Department of Corruption, the Department of Probation, and the Department of Corrections, more specifically in Rikers Island.
Thank you. This is the last question that I have prepared. I'm going to ask it now before we get onto the Q&A session. But would you be able to explain sort of your day-to-day within your jobs, or if you're in law school right now, explain what that day-to-day would look like, so that our panelists can hear. We have some people applying to law school this year, some people who have got into law school already and are making that decision. So would you be able to explain that, please?
So for a long time, when I was in the law firm, my day-to-day was like writing patent applications and helping clients get patents granted for their inventions, and specifically for like life science companies, biotech. And now I'm in, I've been in-house for 3 years, and I kind of feel like it's shifted a little bit, or I'm more of like I'm like a risk, like an issue spotter, and like watching out for things and keeping things from becoming an issue. So, so I'm still interested in intellectual property and protecting our company's intellectual property, but just kind of like looking on like business, like talking to people more on the business side or the marketing side or science side, and just kind of being aware of what they need, like clearing all the paths that they need cleared from an intellectual property perspective so that they can do their job. And I think that's really, I'm grateful for being in a firm and learning the basics of the law that I practice, but I find my job really much more interesting now that I'm in a different role.
Yeah, my day-to-day sort of depends on the day. Sometimes I've got, meetings with clients or sort of opposing counsel throughout the day, and other days I'm mostly just drafting documents. I review a lot of investor disclosure documents because we represent a lot of large investors. And so I also do a lot of writing. I think, and I suspect everybody else would agree that, a big part of the practice is, writing, whether it's a formal memo or a motion or just emails. I mean, we send tons and tons of emails, probably too many. But, all of that is important communication. And so that's something that, lawyers, especially Lisa talked about learning how to think like a lawyer. That's something you'll learn about in law school, that sort of every word you say has a meaning or could have multiple meanings. And that filters all the way down to your phone calls and your email communications. And so all that's to say is, all day I'm communicating in some way and trying to think about the most effective way to do that. But yeah, just in terms of day to day, it changes pretty rapidly.
Yeah, I agree. So when I was clerking for judges, you would assist the judge. The judge, you would review the papers from the different parties on a motion, and then the judge would make a decision, and you'd assist the judge in drafting an opinion or otherwise working on the matter. And now that I'm doing sort of general civil rights practice, I'm one of those parties submitting briefs to judges. So it's nice to have that kind of background knowledge of how judges think and how they view, different arguments and briefs. So now, yeah, I would say like Lisa and Brian both said, my days are pretty different depending on the task I'm working on. So I'll have weeks where I'm just researching writing on my own, pretty solidly. And then I'll have weeks where I'm meeting with clients, or I'm going to court, or I'm taking depositions. It really depends on the case I'm working on and, what's happening in it.
It's, it's the same for me. Starting out in government, I got a pretty varied background of different areas of law. And, the attorneys that I work with that represent local governments, we tend to joke that we see everything in local government, and it could be anything from, being part of a matter that's in court, or, drafting an agreement to make sure the two property owners can share their driveway. So every day is, again, something different. 2 weeks ago, I was on trial, and that finished up then. Last week, I spent, drafting some agreements for my public clients. Even though I'm in private practice now, I represent a number of public entities just based on the background that I had. So, and phone calls, emails, meeting with clients, it's every day something new. So, and that's, one of the things that I appreciate about what I do is that it's not a, standard 9 to 5 clock in and clock out. It's something different all the time. Different issues arise, and you have to figure out how best to address them. So
my day is not as interesting as all of the practicing attorneys, but every day I go to school, I go to classes. You have to do the readings, you have to refresh your outlines because no one's going to be on top of you. And I have finals coming up in 2 weeks, and that is my 100% graded. My test is just, that's it. And that is my final grade. So you have to be on top of that, and you have to make sure that you know what's going on and you know how all these little things connect together. And that's what I do every day, is just trying to figure out the bigger picture of doctrinal classes in law school.
Thank you so much. Now we are going to get into the Q&A portion. Some people have already asked questions. If you're in attendance and would like to ask a question, you can use the Q&A function to do that, and then I will ask it out loud. So the first one we have is, do you all have any thoughts about transferring law schools? If you go into one and you realize you don't really like it, how would you go about that process, transferring to another school?
So I'll say I've seen it done before. I had a classmate who was like actually kind of similarly situated to me, like older and interested in science. And she just had she had an amazing GPA, and it just made sense. Like she just wanted to go to like a school that was ranked in, like one of the top 14 schools, and like so go for it. So it made a lot of sense for her to transfer, because it was going to look great on her resume, and it was still going to be the kind of law that she was interested in studying, whether it was at our school or the other school. So I mean, so like if you're transferring because you know it has like such a better reputation, maybe that makes sense. But if law school ranking is not the only part, and so if you feel like you have a good camaraderie with your professors, or you really like the courses that you're going to get to take after your first year, I think it's sometimes hard to tell, because in your first year you're maybe taking classes that are just foundational classes and not necessarily the classes you're interested in. But so try to see ahead to like what could be there that could be good, or maybe you're really just not happy about it and you just know that you'll be happier at the other place and it makes more sense. But it's the ranking is not everything.
I was just going to say also that so I'm on the recruiting committee for my firm, and so we've hired a number of people, both full time and as summer interns, who transferred law schools at some point. And rarely, if ever, is it like a question that we look at on the resume, like why did they transfer? We just sort of look at people's credentials, and regardless of the reason you're transferring, could be personal, could be like Lisa said, you wanted to kind of move up in rankings. Typically, it doesn't sort of make any difference for us, for what that's worth.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add other than I knew folks that transferred into the law school where I went, where they just, they didn't get the LSAT score that they wanted out of law school, and then they got really great grades, and then they decided to try to, as Lisa was saying, like kind of move up the rankings. I think it's totally normal, and I think a lot of people, transfer. So it's not something I would worry about as some kind of blemish on your resume.
Agreed. I don't have the personal experience, but I know a few, classmates who both transferred in and transferred out after the first year. And I know at my firm now, if a resume came across my desk, I wouldn't think twice about it. There's a lot of reasons why, people have to decide they want to make a change. And, there's other things that I'm looking at when I see that. So transferring is not something I'd be concerned about.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about transferring. I know that you do have to go to the dean of the school and explain why you want to transfer, for them to write it off that you want to transfer out, but it's not a big deal if you do that.
The next question we have is about finding recommenders. So how do you find someone that is able to help you in your journey to getting, when applying to law school, whether it be supporting your application, finding someone that knows your strengths and is able to talk about the great qualities that you have? How did you go about that process when picking someone? Because I know we have people who were doing jobs before going to law school, people who were in majors that are not typically seen with law, and also people who have majors that are typically seen with law. So how did you go about picking someone?
So when I was at TCNJ, it was like I was thinking about going to grad school, but my answer would be, I think my answer applies, even though it was a different school and not law school. I think my most important recommendation was from my biology advisor. He I'd actually had like a different advisor in the beginning of undergrad, and then switched over to him because I had just like a couple of like really good classes with him and had a really good rapport. And he really did so much when I was there to kind of help make sure that I was seeing opportunities, and like I was working in his lab and all that. And so like he kind of saw my evolution as a student and was able to, attest to, not just like my grades, but my interest in it and, my involved dedication to it. And so that was, I mean, I'm sure that I don't remember who else I would have gone to for recommendations, but I know I would have had multiple, but like that was undoubtedly the most important one because he could speak to so much of my my educational background as it related to that particular graduate school.
Yeah, I think I had recommendations from my advisor also, which was Professor McCarty in the School of Business. And again, it was because he knew me. I'd had him for several classes. He was my advisor. He was somebody I went to just for questions on anything, not just sort of applying for law school. So he was one. And the other one was Tom Mahoney, who's the general counsel at TCNJ. So I interned for him. I think it was my senior year, it may have been the summer before senior year also. And so I learned a lot from him, both in terms of what it means to be a good lawyer, but also just understanding what it means to go to law school. So that was also sort of just organically, it seemed like someone who made sense to, be one of my recommenders. So for me, it was just the people who were in front of me who influenced me and sort of knew me best.
Yeah, I agree. Professors, internship advisors, and one thing that I did that I think was helpful was I gave the people that I asked to be my recommenders a copy of my personal statement, so that they could sort of think about how they could echo the themes that I brought up in my personal statement. So I think that was helpful. But yeah, Dr. Roberts was one of my recommenders, and she was very helpful. So
I think it's important to whoever you ask that they're familiar with who you are as a person and what kind of work you do, whether that's as part of an internship, in class, whatever you want. You want the statement to reflect positively on you, and you want people to people who know you best or who know you well, to be able to write that and talk about what your attributes are and why you would be both a good law student and eventually a good lawyer. So those are all important things to consider.
Echoing all of that, I had the chair of my department in criminology write me a letter of recommendation, and I took her, Dr. Leger, I took her for multiple classes. I did a research paper with her. And so she really knew me one-on-one. Dr. Roberts also wrote me one. I took multiple classes with her as well, and she knew me. And then I had a third letter of recommendation written from an attorney that I interned for the entire summer before my senior year. And he did not write on my educational background. He wrote more on my work ethic and my background in the law firm and how I just worked in that space, in the law firm space with him, which I think is really important because you don't need just your educational teachers to write. You can have other people, and it doesn't have to be a legal person writing the recommendation either.
Another question we have is, do the K-GD find it more difficult to find opportunities and jobs?
I'll pass on this one.
So I'm assuming K to JD means straight through. I'm not familiar with that. Maybe that just means I'm old, but no, I mean, I think it kind of, no, I was fortunate that it didn't create any, difficulties for me. I think part of that is because I knew I wanted to work at least for a while at a big law firm. And so the way the system is set up, you're not expected to have prior experience. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be an advantage. There are a lot of people who graduate college and then they're a paralegal for 2 years. And that looks great on a resume, especially if you were working at a big firm and you want to get a job as a lawyer at a big firm. So it's not so much that it creates challenges or a disadvantage going straight through. It's just that sometimes having work experience can be, to your advantage.
Yeah, I agree. I went straight through. I didn't think that it hurt me necessarily when I was looking for jobs. I'm not sure. I think having prior experiences can be a net positive for sure. And I also think that it makes you a little bit more ready for law school in the ways that we've already discussed. I had friends that, and it's not necessarily going out and getting a typical job in the real world too. I had friends that did the Peace Corps for 2 years, or Teach for America, or some sort of public interest-y minded gig for a couple of years. And I think you'll see a decent amount of law students that have that background.
And as I said, my 1 year, gap between undergrad and law school, I was teaching, and it really didn't impact what my future career was going to be. So I can't say from a personal perspective. What I can say is that, some of my partners now are either folks that took non-traditional routes or were paralegals for a few years and then decided to go to law school, or did something else for 4 or 5 years and then went back and went to law school at night, and are now, partners at a law firm. So any route that gets you, that works for your schedule, it works for your personal life, that gets you to where you want to be. I don't think there's one, way or another that is better. I think it all depends on the individual.
I agree. I went straight through. I did not find any issues with it. I think it's beneficial. I do have a lot of friends that did not go straight through. I think the one benefit that they had that I didn't, I had to look for a summer internship. They are going back to, if they were a paralegal at a firm, they're just going back to the firm. So I think that's the one big thing that was a difference between us, where I had to take the time to find an internship and do interviews and do all that stuff where they didn't. But other than that, it really does not matter at all what path you take.
Awesome. Then for the final question that we have is kind of a large one. Does anyone regret going to law school, or are you less enthusiastic about law school? Because you may go in there and you may think it's one thing, expecting one thing, and then you realize, well, it's a different scenario that I got myself into. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't regret going to law school, because I think I knew, I was in the position of knowing, like, this is why I'm going to law school, for a very specific purpose, and kind of given it a lot of thought. So I went to grad school not knowing what I was going to do, and I don't necessarily recommend that if you're paying law school money. It's kind of a different calculus. It's a lot of money to pay to go to law school. Honestly, it's phenomenally expensive, and if you don't really see what your end goal is, it's maybe worth waiting and taking a job, whether it's in the legal sector or somewhere else, and just kind of solidifying what it is you think you want. But if you kind of know what it is you think you want to get out of it, even if things can shift, for me, it was still worthwhile to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I think probably all of us can think of people we went to law school with who probably just kind of went to law school because that's what was there to do, despite the fact that it takes a lot of work to get in. So I wouldn't recommend doing that if you're thinking, well, I think I want to go to grad school, I'll just do law school. I think you may regret it if you do that. But otherwise, certainly don't regret it. It has created a lot of opportunities for me. Again, you learn a lot of great skills, both in law school and practicing. So no, I can't, maybe on a different day, I might feel like I regret it depending on what's going on, but no, it was a great choice overall.
Yeah, agreed. No regrets. And I think something that I didn't fully grasp before going was how, for me, it was like a really fun intellectual experience. Like, I loved going to class and learning, and especially the classes that sort of, went beyond just what's in the textbook, talking about the philosophy behind the law or the impacts in real life, things like that. I love that stuff. And so the experience of law school is definitely stressful, but it can be really, really fulfilling too.
I definitely don't regret going to law school at all. I know, at the time where I went from about 2008 to 2011, there was a number of my classmates who they didn't know what they wanted to do. The job market wasn't great, so they chose law school, thinking, it's a path to a career. I think it would be a tough way to get through if that was my approach. I think you have to have a pretty decent idea that you want a career that, if you're not a practicing lawyer, that there's some way that those 3 years or 4 years in law school are going to benefit you. So I think that's an important consideration when making the investment in both money and time that it takes to go to law school. As Brian said, that there's some days now practicing where, it can be a lot of work and a lot of stress, and you get second thoughts when you go home at night, but that only lasts a little while. And, there's usually something the next day that snaps you out of it. So that's generally been my experience.
I don't regret law school, at least not yet. But it's an amazing experience. A lot of my classmates came from jobs during COVID and then decided to take the LSAT and go to law school because they didn't know if they were going to go back to their jobs or not. So a lot of them ended up dropping the first semester because either they realized this was not for them, or they don't remember why they wanted to come to law school and they didn't want to put themselves in that debt. So I think it's an amazing experience. I've learned so much, very, very quickly. I can't believe the year is almost over. However, you should really, really think about, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Because you are putting yourself in thousands and thousands of dollars of debt and time time taken away.
May I sneak in here and just confess that last question was actually my question. And I think that my experience with a lot of pre-law students at the College of New Jersey has been that when they do go on to law school, it may be kind of a unique group of students, really, but I have yet to meet one who has said anything like that they regretted going to law school, who basically at the end of the day, they think it was a great experience. It's intellectually fun, and you do get this feeling that in studying the law, whichever direction you then take, the kind of main thing you're going to be doing is helping people at some level or another. And it's just, that's a good feeling too for most of our College of New Jersey students. You said something about, Bill, negotiating an agreement for a shared driveway. You can't imagine how important that stuff is. And, that helping people in that way, helping them start little businesses, helping them figure out trust in estates, helping them on the civil rights front and broker-dealer regulation. It's all a matter of sort of getting in there and figuring things out and helping people. And I thought it was a lot more fun than getting a PhD in philosophy myself. But I hope you all, at the end of the day, feel like it was a great decision to make. And we are here to help you, the designated pre-law advisors, to help students read with their personal statements. We who have had you in courses where you've done some writing for us, where you've done some work, it's our professional obligation and privilege to write really strong letters of reference for you, really detailed, super enthusiastic letters of reference for you. And it's been a great pleasure to me to work with these students over time. So I'll turn it back over to Dylan. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you all for coming. We really appreciate talking to us as students. I know I was a current junior who might be applying to law school this year. I found it very beneficial, and I hope that others find it beneficial as well. So thank you once again, and now I'm going to hand you back to James.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to our alumni panelists. It was great having you all speak here. And thank you, Dylan, for being a wonderful moderator, and the Pre-Law Society for coming up with great questions for everyone. And thank you, Melinda, as well, for coming on and jumping on and being here to help us with all this. So thank you, and I hope that we got some thank you for the panelists, but I hope that everyone learned a lot. I certainly did, even though I'm not considering law school. I think it's fun information, but I hope that everyone has a great rest of their day. And thank you again, alumni, for being here for our students, because we really do appreciate it. Thank you all.
Before we go, can we get a picture for our Instagram?
Oh,
Can we get a
yes.
screenshot?
I forgot.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind, I'm just gonna take it on my laptop. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a good one and
Have a good
have
one.
fun in your law careers.